Moving on to conditional statements, we have the if statement. So let's suppose we have a code, and sometimes while we're writing it, we need to execute a specific statements under a specific condition. So let's suppose we're searching for a specific number or a specific character in a string, and whenever we find this character or this number, we just print it out and say that we found it. So how do we do that? We will use the if statement. If we found the specific character, we'll print it out. Now, as we can see here, first we have our condition. If this condition is true, we need to execute a specific code and then move on to the rest of our code. However, if it's not true, then we'll do nothing and just jump and continue with the rest of our code. So let's go ahead and write the if statement in Python. Let me delete these. And let's suppose we have an integer x will be equal to 10, and we're going to check if x is positive. So if x is greater than 0, followed by a colon, and that indicates that we are now in the block, in the body of our if statement. So after writing the if and followed by the condition, we need to write our body. Now, every line of our code in the if statement must be indented. So for example, if we, let's say, print x is positive, and let's run this code, we'll get an error saying that expected an indented block. So how do we indent it? We simply press tab and let's run the code one more time. We'll get x is positive. Now, if we write something here, for example, the end, let's run this code, we'll get x is positive and the end. Even though x is, if it's not positive, let's suppose x is equal to -5, and let's run this code, we'll get the end in both cases, since this print statement is not in the body of the if statement. We also have something called alternative execution, and in this case, sometimes we want to check for a number. Let's say if x is positive, we'll print x is positive, otherwise we'll print x is negative. So sometimes we want to do something if a specific condition is satisfied, and completely another thing if if it is otherwise. So here we have the alternative execution. How it works, we'll simply write our code, we'll face a condition. If it's true, we'll do an action. If it's false, we'll do the alternative action, and then we'll continue with our rest of the code. So let's go ahead and implement this here. For example, we're saying that if x is positive, print x is positive, else print x is negative. And in this case, let's run this code. We have x is equal to -5, so we'll get x is negative and of course the end, since the end is not involved in any of these blocks. Now let's move on to chained conditionals. So sometimes we might want to have more than two conditions. So for example, we need to check if x is positive, if it is negative, and if it is equal to 0. So how do we do that? We will use the else if, and the abbreviation of this else if is elif. So for example, we're going to check x is positive, print x is positive, and here we write elif, and in this case print x is negative, and finally if both are not satisfied, we just simply print that x is equal to 0. And let's go ahead and run this code. We'll get, actually we didn't specify the condition, and what we're going to do is specify that x is negative, print x is negative, otherwise print x is equal to 0, and in this case x is equal to -5, so we'll get x is negative and the end. However, if it is equal to 0, we get that x is equal to 0 followed by the end. Now we also have something that is called nested conditionals, and in this case we have an if-else statement, and inside the body of the if or the body of the else we have another if-else statement. So let me demonstrate it here. Let's suppose we have x equal to 2 and y equal to 3. First of all, we're going to check if x or y are equal, and if this is not the case, then we're going to check if x is less than y or x is greater than y. So first of all, we simply check if x is equal to y, and in this case, we simply print that x and y are equal. However, if this is not the case, we'll check if x is less than y, and in this case we'll print x is less than y. Otherwise, we'll print that x is greater than y. And in this case, x is 2 and y is 3, so we'll get x is less than y. So we could have done the same exact code using chain conditionals. So instead of entering the else here, we can simply, let me type it here, elif x is less than y, we'll print x is less than y, and otherwise we'll print that x is greater than y. So if we run the code, here we have the column, and let's run this code one more time. We'll get x is less than y. So we'll get the same output if we use chained or nested conditionals. Now let's suppose that we have an integer x, and in this case we're going to check if x is greater than 0 and less than 10. So we can write that if x is greater than 0, we're going to check if x is less than 10, and we'll print x is between 0 and 10. And in this case, x is equal to 2. If we run this code, we'll get x is between 0 and 10. So we could have wrote this code using one if statement. So we're going to check if x is greater than 0 and x is less than 10. So we'll simply use the AND operator, and x less than 10, simply print x is between 0 and 10. Let's run this code and we'll get the same exact result as before.